morning, creatives. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Great. Good? Good. All right. Wake up. Take a sip of that coffee. So before I even get started, I want to do a little exercise with you guys. And I want you to think of the barriers in your life, the things that are holding you back from doing something that you really want to be doing. Whatever that may be, mowing your lawn, creating something unique or new, or moving, or starting a family, or whatever that may be. Like, take a second and think about what those barriers are. Jot them down or just keep them in your head. So I'm going to give you just a quick second to run through your mind and think about those barriers. And then I'll come back to that. So everyone got kind of like what's holding them back in life, or starting them to do a project or whatever that may be? Yeah, feeling good? Okay. Okay, so who am I? I'm Kim Van Driel. I'm the Director of Public Space Management for Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. And basically that's a long-winded word of just saying I'm a curator and I'm a planner. I'm an urban planner ultimately for downtown through community building. And that usually is through arts, public space activation, events, programming, park redesign, stuff like that. I'm a resident of the city of Grand Rapids. I live in Creston. I'm a proud Creston neighborhood resident. And I'm a servant to my community, so I volunteer a lot. I'm on a lot of different boards, like Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, the City of Grand Rapids Parks Department, the fire department, Athena, cultural marketing group, the list goes on. So I'm involved in a lot of things. I really believe in giving back to my community and getting involved. It's helped me to meet a lot of really cool people, like being here today. It's really nice because I get to see faces I haven't seen before, so I love doing that. But who am I really? So that's me. That's my first day of school to kindergarten. It was raining that day, but I looked absolutely rad in that pink coat. So I guess just like a little bit of background about me is I grew up in a suburb of Grand Rapids. I was always a creative kid. I loved the arts, but I was just really, really bad at it. Like, I had no patience to finish anything that I started. I'm a total typical Aries. Like, I get that energy to start, and I'm like, sorry, like, I'm over it, move on. So, I never really had that kind of patience, and I wasn't really good at it either. I also didn't really know anything, have any direction of what I wanted to do, what I could do in life. It was like, you were told you could be a teacher, or, it's the standard things that you think of as a career path. And I definitely didn't ever think what I'm doing now was even a thing. So I went to Kent Skills, if y'all are familiar with that here. So I went to the graphic design program. And then I realized, you can be creative doing something digital. What else am I gonna do? So my stepsister actually went to the Art Institute of Chicago for graphic design, and I'm like, I'll do that. But my parents were like, you have to go to college no matter what. You can't not go to college, because originally I didn't want to do that. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to be here doing that. So I moved across country to Colorado, spent a crap load of money on a private college, and learned a lot of life lessons. And graduated with an associate's with graphic design there, and then decided that Colorado wasn't the spot for me at the time. I moved down to Florida, and then I finished my BA in advertising from the Art Institute of Tampa. And then after that, I moved back to Grand Rapids in a recession. Couldn't find a job at all. I was waitressing, and God help me, I absolutely hate waitressing. I'm just not that type of people person, so that was a really big challenge for me. I started doing freelance here for companies, for events, and YMCA and stuff like that. Then I started working for a corporation here, and it literally sucked the soul out of me, and I realized I just spent a ton of money going to school for this, and I absolutely hate this. I hate graphic design. I hate doing advertising. It was not the spot for me. So I really struggled at like what I'm gonna do. And I was about to move back to Florida because I couldn't figure out like what it is here that I'm gonna do. And Florida was better economically at the time than it was in Grand Rapids, that's for sure. So then I got offered a job. It was a split position with the city of Grand Rapids between two different municipalities. So one was the Downtown Development Authority, the DDA, which is now housed in downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. And then the Office of Special Events, which was in the police department at that time. And I started working there. I absolutely loved it, working with event organizers and planners, and really got into it, basically. And then we posted something about doing, to the public, how do people feel about doing movies in the park? So that went huge, and obviously that became my job to figure out how to plan movies in the park. So that was my very first thing, and it was huge, way beyond what I expected it to be, which is really, really exciting. And then I got hired on with what became Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. to start planning all of the events and programming and do some graphic design and all that kind of stuff. So ultimately, how I got here is when I was young, I always wanted to be that advocate for change. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to leave my mark. There's no way as a kid I felt that I could do that at all. And I had no clue how I was going to accomplish that. But now I'm able to do that with my job at Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. that I actually created for myself. And now I'm able to make a lot of positive change within the community. So how do I do that? What is it that I actually do? I help change public policy, with movies in the park. You weren't ever allowed to have any sort of booze at all at events unless you were fenced in per liquor license. We found a loophole in the system, and now you can drink everywhere downtown because we continue to push that and move that forward. So that's a big initiative. We're all adults and we can handle drinking on the street. It's okay, Life will go on. So that's something that we got to do. I'm really involved in public space design. So designing public spaces when we're renovating parks like Rosa Park Circle or Anabalwin Park or 6th Street Park, Hartside, all that. I'm involved in that with our architect and planner and designer, and I really, really love helping to plan our public spaces. I'm a curator, so I curate everything downtown. If there's, my job is to fill in the gaps of what's not there. So there's tons of programming in the summer, right? I don't need to focus on the summer, so I focus on the off-season months, basically. Or if there's not a water festival, which there wasn't, so I contacted the Asian Association. I'm let's do a water festival. Now it's turned into the Global Water Festival. So I specifically reach out, curate, and fund projects that we want to see that are our goals as an organization. Activation, so lots of planning of programming and events and all that kind of stuff, public artwork. It's all about placemaking and placekeeping in our community. I'm driven by inclusion, so everything that I plan, it's making sure I'm doing it with an equity lens, teaching people how to start off with a program, let's say it's a grant and they're not familiar with how to fill out the grant, teaching them how to do it, teaching them how to go through all the city bureaucratic red tape that they have to go through, so then in the future they don't need me, they can teach other people too. So building the community up to take initiative for themselves and teaching them how to do it so they can do it on their own in the first. And then advocating. I'm constantly advocating for public space, women, people within our community, trying to make positive change for our community, right? A lot of things are scary for government to make certain changes within the community, but if you look at, I'm inspired by so many other cities like Miami or Austin, you look at what really works, so what are we so afraid of? If we see that it works other places, we can do it too. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. So let's challenge that status quo, and I'm constantly pissing people off, and it's something I'm really, really good at. So this was the first, this is one example of one of the things that I did. It was illegal to operate a food truck downtown back in the day, so our organization changed the legality of that to make it so food trucks can come down whenever they want, changed the process of that, and then we did this big rolling out food truck festival in order to celebrate that, and like 10,000 people came out just to stand in line for literally 2 hours. It was insanity. But now, so I'm good at building something and passing it along. Like I get, again, Aries, I get really bored. So I like to create it, and then I like to pass it so someone else can run it, and then I'm on to the next thing. So now I pass this off to the Grand Rapids Food Truck Association. They run this event. It's happening this Sunday at Calder Plaza, so come get some food truck food. Next thing that I helped to do was the apartment lounge really wanted a rainbow crosswalk. Our mayors wanted public art crosswalks in our city. It's technically not allowed. So I found a loophole. Rather than being able to paint the actual sidewalk, I can paint the whole damn street. So that's what I did. So now we have Rainbow Row downtown. And this one is like very, very near and dear to my heart. It's probably my favorite project I've ever gotten to work on. And I don't know if many of you know this, but Anabawan Park, historical site, right? Major stuff happened there for many, many years. So the chief of the Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians I'm lucky enough to say he's a really close friend of mine now through the decade that I've been at Downtown Grand Rapids Inc. But by working with him, there used to be this plum tree orchard that was in Anabawan Park, and it was there in honor of the women that were raped and murdered from the white settlers when they first came here. That plum tree orchard was planted in honor of those women for healing. Of course, natives got moved out, white man buys the land, rips up the plum tree orchard, and this is a big thing for our native community. It's a very sacred site, and they'd love to see it back. So we're working on bringing that back. And we're looking at potential sites along our river corridor as we're doing renovations. But in honor of acknowledging what used to be there, we worked with the chief to plant a symbolic plum tree in Anabawan Park and hired local artist Jason Quigno to do a custom sculpture design for the plaque, and then hired Alan Campo, also a tribal member, to paint Anishinaabeg in the tunnel underneath Gillette Bridge leading into Anabawan Park that depicts the story and the moments of these women being blessed and blessing along the river. And we did water ceremony and all that stuff. So I love community healing on things and acknowledging the crappy things that have happened, right? And you can't change it, but you can at least acknowledge it and call it out and try to do something positive and build that relationship back. So that's really important to me. 555, if any of you guys are familiar with 555 Monroe, this was a parking lot, 4 parking lots owned by different municipalities, and the city parks department purchased the land through a federal grant. Part of that grant, they had to activate it within so many days. The Parks Department staff is pretty small, and they're not really like event planners, right? So the Parks Director called me, and he's like, I got this land. I don't know what to do with it. Help me out. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Like, movies in the park is screwed because we built the flood wall up higher, so it was very difficult, like, logistically. So I'm like, I can do movies on Monroe over here. We brought out like hundreds of different artists out, paint the space, yarn bomb it, blah, 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 blah. And now it's like a pop-up interactive intervention, and it's a test ground for what will what will be there in the future. So usually like a lot of things like that the city's like, I don't know about that, like in the park, this is a great place to go because it's like, it's trial and error in this space. So I love this space because there's constantly like more organic things happening there. And now we have a skate park, so, but I'll get into that. So, World of Winter, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but this is my newer thing. We started this like, I don't know, a really long time ago. It started as a one-day event, then it grew into a weekend, and then a month, and now it's 2 months long, and it's called World of Winter. And it was very events-focused, large events. Pandemic happens, we have to pivot. So how are we gonna do that? And then I'm like, all right, let's expand the duration of the program so it's not like everyone has to be down here on one weekend or within a couple weeks, so we're spread out a little bit more. Also, we'll scale back on our larger events and do pop-up interventions and pop-up activities. And then we'll bring in international, national, and local art so people can move around through the city and you're not plugged into one park. So over the last couple years, it's gotten really huge. We had over, it's like 500,000, I think, in the first month that came out. So it was great. We had lots of people that came, and we're continuing. Like right now, I'm already sifting through RFPs for proposals from art and what we're gonna bring this year. So as we continue to get a little bit out of this pandemic, we'll continue to add more of our past bigger events and stuff like that. But then Rad American Women. So I don't know if you guys have seen these mechanical boxes throughout the downtown. But I bought this book for my niece, and I was sitting on the couch drinking by myself, and I'm like, this is a pretty cool book. And then I'm like, how can I do this, something like interesting with this? Oh, mechanical boxes, those look like crap. Let's do something with those. So I thought it'd be really cool to hire female identifying artists to paint a woman from the book that they resonate with. And I hired Lions and Rabbits Art Gallery, Center for the Arts, Hannah Berry, to help me organize this project with all of the artists. And we have 27 mechanical boxes now downtown and walking tours, and it's a fun thing that we have. And that led me to Women's Way. So when I did Rad American Women, the Women's History Council of Greater Grand Rapids called me, and they're lovely ladies. But they were like, we like what you're doing, but they're not local women, so you should do something with local women. I'm like, you're right. All right, I'm on it. So next thing was alley activation. This is a global trend, right? Activating alleyways. Our public spaces are getting more costly to rent out, like parks. We're looking at pop-up unique interventions that's one of a kind. And these are just like forgotten spaces, ultimately. So I was thinking that ultimately, because there's no streets named after women in our city, that's a big, big bummer, and we help build this city too. So how do we call attention to that there are no streets named after women? Is starting to name these alleys after women, recognizing that women in our history in alleys isn't so great. So calling attention to that and flipping the script and changing the narrative for ourselves, creating like a safer space for us to be in, that we feel more comfortable in it. So the first step was hiring local artists to paint women that have helped pave the way for the women today within our community. We've done 5. We'll add at least 1 more every year. So this is a continuing, growing program that we have. And then we have the Windows GR project. So during the civil unrest of George Floyd, it was extremely unfortunate incident. I can't even begin to say. So ultimately, our community came together, and our businesses boarded up their windows, worried about being broken into and whatnot. So there was a local group called Element 7 that band together. It's 7 people of color that wanted to create this initiative along with Lions and Rabbits Art Gallery to paint all the windows downtown. So they were gonna do this, and we were like, well, who's paying you to do it? How are you getting supplies? They're like, I don't know, we're just figure it out. I'm like, all right, I will pay every single person that does this. We'll pay money to get supplies, and all you guys have to do is organize it. And then they were able to sell their boards if they wanted to and make money as well. So it was a really great community building project for sure that I was excited to be a part of, because all the streets literally became a gallery. So I was loving it. Next thing, skate park. So this has been talked about to death before I even started working at DJI, and then continuing people wanting a place to skate and a new place to play downtown. We're not there for a permanent infrastructure. We're looking at it, and potentially what it's written as in our master plan is that it would go over near 555, potentially under 96 highway. So with 555, I was like, let's do this. Screw movies. Let's do a skate park, and then we'll build other things. So that happened. We just opened last year for the skate park. That was very out of my element. I know absolutely nothing about skateboarding, but I learned a lot. So that was a fun project as well. And then these are our grant programs that I manage and offer. So we have our seasonal public space activation grant program, a long word, or long sentence there, but this is focused on giving grants for activation events and whatever during the colder months of the year. Again, trying to fill that gap and incentivize people to do something outside of the norm. The Activate This Place, there's 3 different grants within there. There's a parklet grant, a window activation grant, and then a placemaking grant. And that could be an event, it could be a mural, it could be a sculpture, it could be anything. So these are rolling. We review them 4 times a year, and currently they're up to $5,000. We're changing that. Soon it will be up to $10,000 that you can apply. So stay tuned for that. Also, World of Winter is I do a giant global call for RFP. And I get all kinds of submissions, right? But I also do that local people can apply for as well. But then I do a specific cast call for up to $10,000 for local artists and creatives and event organizers only. And that goes out a little bit later, so that will go out later this summer. But those are different ways of getting involved and sharing what you want to create with the community as far as public space activation stuff. So these are just some examples of some of the things that we've funded through the program. We've got sculptures, murals, placemaking, building spots, basketball court. This was a fun one we did for World of Winter, which was a vending machine, and it was these activities of encouragement that you got to play for free or whatever, or you could pay into, which helped to fund the artists to add more stuff in there. So, back to exercise 1. Ultimately, my greatest barrier in life was thinking that I was going to fail, that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't creative enough, I couldn't find my niche, I couldn't do what I really, really wanted to do. And a while ago, that word failure really messed me up, and now I absolutely hate that word. I do not believe that word exists. There is no such thing as failing. It's all lessons that you're meant to learn. And that was my greatest barrier, and that was holding me back from doing some of the things that I really, really wanted to do in life. I was afraid of failing. Now I am not afraid of that at all. I've found that confidence, and I think that word has so much power, but it's because you give it that power. So don't ever think that failure is a real thing. You might try something and it might not work out, but that just means you pivot and you retry again, you don't quit. So failure just doesn't exist for me. So I want you to think of your barriers that you thought of earlier when you sat down, and really like think about what that is. And I always say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, are you giving those barriers too much power? And if you are, like, why is that? What is it that is really holding you back? Is it really worth that? So really think about that as you're trying to mow the lawn, if that's the barrier, or creating something or moving or whatever it is. Like, what is actually holding you back, and why are you giving it that much power? So think about that. Exercise too, and this is your homework. I'm told you guys like homework. So our grants that we offer, a lot of people don't think that they can like fit within that grant or whatever it is. I have sat down with so many creatives and artists and programmers that just have this idea of something, and we've funded it. A lot of people have moved now from Grand Rapids because by funding his or hers one project, it got them so many other projects, and now they're not even here anymore, which is a bummer for us, but it's really, really great to see them succeed. So what I would encourage you to do is think about your craft, whatever that may be, the thing that really drives you and that you're good at, that's your creativity, and how you might be able to implement that through one of our like grant programs, or just by talking to me saying, I've got this idea, I don't know exactly what I can do with it. I'm very creative, so if I see a creative or hear a creative idea, it also inspires me a lot of times. And I'm also a connector within the community, so it might not always be me that's able to make it happen or fund it, but I know so many people that could possibly help you out, so I'm constantly connecting to other resources within our community. So that's it. So now's your chance to get up and try something that you may feel a little uncomfortable, and I mean, as cliche as it is, but your time is now, so make the change.